In an earlier video I made about the M. Night Shyamalan Collection and my first introduction to the writer-director, I mentioned maybe making videos on all the 3 movies featured on said collection: The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs. If you're hearing my voice right now, it means I went through with it. I would suggest you watch the video if you haven't, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. It's just that I worked really hard on it and all, and it would make me feel really good if you did. Also, I give short summaries on my experiences with these films there, that I am going to expand upon here, on top of just context to how I came across these 3 films that hold a special place in my heart now. So, without further ado, The Sixth Sense. Most of the people watching will know The Sixth Sense. Even if you haven't seen it, you'll know
I see dead people.
At least. The film was a huge hit in 1999, the year's second biggest film, right behind this other one some might have heard of. While usually films make their biggest profits on opening weekend, The Sixth Sense was a different case. On its opening weekend, the film grossed $26 million, after which it spent 5 weeks as the #1 film at the box office, grossing over $20 million each weekend. The only other film before it to manage that was Titanic, a huge James Cameron epic that everyone and their mothers went to see. Shyamalan's previous movie, 1998's Wide Awake, made under $300,000 at the box office, and I'm sure many are even surprised to hear he made a movie before The Sixth Sense. He did. 2, actually. So how did this horror film from an at the time unknown director pull off some Titanic shit? Short answer, being a damn good movie. Long answer, well, that's the rest of the video, I guess. But most would probably attribute that runaway success to the big thing the movie's known for: the twist.
What a twist!
If you have somehow not been spoiled, what are you doing? Go watch the movie while you still can. I guarantee my video on it isn't going to be 1/millionth as good as the film itself. Experience it and then come back and tell me what you think. Consider this a spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1.
Like in The Sixth Sense, you find out that the dude in that hairpiece the whole time, that's Bruce Willis, the whole movie.
That's not the twist.
That's not the twist of that movie.
That wasn't the twist?
No.
In the beginning of the movie, we see Malcolm Crowe, played by Bruce Willis, with his wife Anna, played by Olivia Williams, in their home celebrating as Malcolm got honored for his work as a child psychologist. A former patient of Malcolm's, Vincent Gray, played in a small but very effective role by Donnie Wahlberg, has broken into their home and is brandishing a gun. He shoots Malcolm because Malcolm failed to help him as a child. Malcolm luckily survives, or so we think. 6 months later, Malcolm is assigned a new patient, Cole Sear, played by Haley Joel Osment. Malcolm gets invested in helping the kid because he reminds him of Vincent Gray.
Because he feels that if he can help this new boy, be like helping that other one too.
In a pivotal scene, after Cole and Malcolm have gotten closer, around the midpoint of the movie, Cole finally tells Malcolm his secret. Cole can see and communicate with the dead, but the dead, A, don't know they are dead, and B, can't see each other. If you haven't seen The Sixth Sense, first of all,
You naughty.
but second of all, you can probably see where this is going. At the very end, after he has helped Cole and they part ways, he finds out that he himself was dead the whole time. He didn't survive getting shot in the beginning, and the whole movie is recontextualized. Oh my God. In the year of our Lord 2021, Shyamalan's reputations for twist endings is controversial, but whatever missteps he might have taken since, nothing can take away from how truly amazing the twist is. Not only for how it catches you off guard, but how it still makes sense while doing so, and puts the whole movie in a new light in a second watch. The other context for the twist is Malcolm's seemingly failing marriage to Anna. From Malcolm's perspective, this is because Malcolm is too obsessed with his work. They even set up this red herring in the very beginning. Throughout the movie, we see their marriage slowly falling apart as they spend time away from each other and are unable to communicate. Cole tells Malcolm he could talk to his wife in his sleep, without Malcolm or the audience realizing Cole was helping Malcolm too, just like Malcolm advised him to. The scene of the twist is Malcolm talking to Anna in her sleep, finally achieving the communication they were failing at throughout the movie. Anna is watching their wedding tape, and midway in their conversation drops Malcolm's wedding ring on the floor. This is when Malcolm realizes he isn't wearing the ring and starts to see the world the way it is, as the dead only see what they want to see. We flash back to show how previous scenes in the movie actually played out, giving us just the right amount of context so that we're still wrapped up in the emotion of the scene and don't start thinking of all the logistics too much. The music swells, Malcolm finally sees his bullet wound, We flash back to the first scene and now see Malcolm die. Seriously, I know people say it jokingly nowadays, but what a twist. What a fucking twist. And what makes the twist so good is that now you gotta watch it the second time, and the film is now satisfying in a whole other way. And when you're on your second watch, or third, or however many times I've watched this, it all seems so obvious. Like I should have seen it coming from a mile away. How did I not realize it when the camera zooms in on Bruce Willis's face while Cole is saying,
They don't know they're dead.
but I didn't. None of us did. Some will say they did, but they're just trying to impress you. Never mind them. Shyamalan tricks us in many ways. The biggest is using film conventions against us. We think movies and scenes work a certain way. When we cut into a scene like this, two people sitting on chairs facing each other, we think they just had a conversation, even if the movie didn't show us. We're expected to fill in that context, because that's how movies work. And when Cole enters the room, his mother, played brilliantly by Toni Collette, goes and talks to him, then exits. Malcolm and Cole's mom, Lynn Sear, don't share one line through the entire movie. And then you realize, wait a minute, nobody talked to Bruce Willis other than Cole the entire movie after he got shot. In fact, nobody ever even acknowledges him. Not at the doctor's office, not at the funeral. He's just walking around and nobody notices him.
See, nobody cares.
There are other details, like Malcolm wearing the same clothes he had on the day of the shooting throughout the film. Or when he goes to dinner with his wife on their anniversary, he doesn't move the chair at all when he sits on it, and the check is pulled from him before he has a chance to touch it. The rule is, in general, the dead can't affect the physical world, unless they exert enough force, like when Malcolm breaks a window when he sees his wife kissing another man. That's all I'm going to say about the twist, and if you watch this without seeing the movie first, well, that's on you. I tried to warn you.
Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to...
I've seen people say that the movie is overrated only because of its great twist and the rest of the movie isn't that remarkable. I think this is a more recent thing and probably comes from the general shift in public opinion on Shyamalan. It's still an unfair assessment, and not only because the twist wouldn't be that remarkable hadn't the rest of the film built up so well to it. Like, my favorite aspect of the film is Cole and his relationship to his mother, and the twist doesn't really have that much to do with them as it does with Malcolm, being that he's the guy who was dead the whole time. It's often said that good horror film is one that should work if you pulled the horror elements out of it. I don't know what to think of this, but I get the idea behind it. Even without the scares, you want your story and your characters to be strong. And while The Sixth Sense is a scary movie, it definitely works on just a dramatic level. The Sixth Sense is a story about communication and the breakdown of it. The obvious one is between Malcolm and Anna, but the other big one is between Cole and his mother. And I'll just stop for a second and say, Haley Joel Osment and Toni Collette fucking rocked their roles. I don't think I've ever seen a child performance quite like Osment's, and Toni Collette is brilliant in everything she's in. But goddamn do these two just work so well together. They elevate their material, and their material was already amazing. Over and over, we are shown this miscommunication between these two characters, with him obviously not being able to tell her the truth of his situation. Lynn knows that there is obviously something wrong with her son, but is frustrated that he won't, or from his perspective, can't tell her. Cole has drawn disturbing drawings in school, but doesn't do that anymore.
How do you draw now?
Draw. People smiling. Dogs running. Rainbows. They don't have meetings about rainbows.
There is a superficial correcting of the problem, but not a true solution to it. With Cole helping Malcolm to connect with his wife, likewise, Malcolm helps Cole with his communication problem, although not as directly. Malcolm helps Cole to realize that the dead don't want to hurt him, but they only need help, even the scary ones. By helping Cole, and being that Cole felt ready to share his secret already with Malcolm, Cole at the end of the film feels ready to share the same secret with his mom. He reveals something about Lynn's own mother that he couldn't have known had he not been able to communicate with the dead directly. This also reveals there was a breakdown of communication with Lynn and her mother, not dissimilar to Lynn and Cole now. The third big problem of communication, which we already touched on, is the one with the dead people. The dead cannot see each other, and they cannot communicate with anyone except people that are able to see them, like Cole or Vincent. Malcolm helps Cole see that the dead only need help, and at the end of the film we see Cole talk with a dead person that would have before seemed scary to him. Even where the movie starts, with Vincent shooting Malcolm, this is brought on because Malcolm failed to help him. I think that's enough evidence the movie is really about communication. But what I really wanted to say, this movie is much more than its twist. The twist is fantastic, and yeah, the movie probably wouldn't have been the runaway success it was if it weren't for that twist. But the movie has so much more to offer outside of that. Even then, the twist wouldn't be what it is if it weren't for the amazing legwork the movie did to set it all up for one of the best payoffs in cinema. It all works together. You can't pull one element out without messing up the effectiveness of the rest. And that segues me nicely to...
Thanks to modern editing techniques, we can use existing footage to complete the film without Milhouse. Watch.
So this is going to be a shorter segment, but it's something that's going to come up with Unbreakable and Signs too. In fact, pretty much any Shyamalan film. It feels fitting to bring up Peter Jackson once again, since I brought him up a bunch in the M. Night Shyamalan Collection video. Peter Jackson makes 3-hour epics, long and massive films, and I love that for him. The Lord of the Rings requires 3 hours each movie to get through. This approach usually works for him. Shyamalan is the opposite. He's yet to make a film over 2 hours long, usually averaging around 1 hour 40 minutes. His movies are tight, which year by year, I find myself loving those kinds of movies more and more. Even Unbreakable, which feels much slower, is only hour and 47 minutes. There just isn't any fat on Shyamalan's films. Nowadays I feel lucky if I find a movie that's even 2 hours flat. Something approaching the 90-minute mark is just what I like to see. Not that I have a problem with long movies. Again, Lord of the Rings should be 3 hours. I just love when a filmmaker knows how to keep it tight. But The Sixth Sense is a horror movie. And as we all know, themes are for 8th grade book reports. And we're not nerds here. We're cool dudes who like scary shit. And so far, I've seemed to have talked about anything but the horror aspects of this horror film. So, let's talk about the horror.
Oh, the horror.
What?
The horror.
Are you doing...
Marlon Brando from Apocalypse.
This is no time for fucking imitations.
It isn't until almost an hour into the film when we see our first dead person. It isn't even until 50 minutes in until Cole tells Malcolm his secret and we find out that seeing dead people is the problem. Although, realistically, we all knew it was the problem before getting into the film. That line was in the trailers, and it's too iconic not to know. But in the film itself, we just know that something is wrong with this boy, and whatever it is, seems supernatural in nature. From the first scene, we see that Cole seems to be afraid of something. He has a grey patch of hair, as did Vincent in the beginning, a detail Shyamalan gave both of them to have a physical trait that is shared among people who see these spirits, as a consequence of the trauma that comes from seeing them. It neatly visually ties these two people together, even if it's not really something that's noticeable on the first watch. And it gives us this idea that whatever is wrong with Vincent is wrong with Cole. And he also has a child psychiatrist following him, so I guess that's kind of a tell that something's wrong.
I didn't know you were funny.
The supernatural elements start to stack slowly, starting with the more subtle, that could still somewhat reasonably be explained away, building up to the undeniable. That is, for us, what keeps the situation still less scary and frustrating is that nobody in the reality of the film knows that something supernatural is going on. They catch on that something is, but not the nature of what it is. When the secret is revealed and we finally start seeing some dead people, Shyamalan goes all in, as much as you can in a PG-13 movie. We see ghosts with cuts on their wrists, ghosts with bullet wounds in their heads, ghosts that have been hanged. Most of the horror in the film is based on suspense and is more psychological in nature. But these few hits of seeing something just terrifying, especially from a child's point of view, do nothing but enhance the horror. They really get you to understand how this is such a traumatic experience for Cole. But I'm also glad they had restraint in this matter. As much as I love R-rated horror films, I don't think I'd want The Sixth Sense to be one. And honestly, The Sixth Sense manages to be more horrifying than many R-rated horror films I've seen. The most horrifying things in The Sixth Sense aren't seeing the ghosts, or really the supernatural aspects in on themselves. Similar to something like Hereditary, I think the real horror in Sixth Sense is seeing these characters go through this, seeing the pain this causes Cole and his mother. And hey, look at that! Both feature Toni Collette going through this hell. Film theory. Are The Sixth Sense and Hereditary in the same Toni Collette expanded universe? The most horrifying scene in the film for me happens after we found out that Cole can see dead people, and instead of wanting to hurt him, they're looking for help. It's when Cole sees the ghost of a child named Kira, who appears in his self-made tent in his room and vomits before him. This is when Cole first decides, despite being scared, to help one of the ghosts. Cole and Malcolm travel to Kira's house, where we see a funeral taking place. They go up to Kira's room, where Cole sees Kira's ghost again, this time showing him a box with a videotape in it that she wants Cole to give to her father. It's only when the father watches this tape when the true horror sets in. What starts as just a videotape doll performance turns terrifying when the girl's mother steps in to feed the girl. We see Kira's mother poison her, seemingly a case of Munchausen's by proxy, a real condition where a caregiver causes or makes up an illness or injury to a person they're taking care of. Seeing as Kira died, it's evident the mother went too far in their attempts, but a piece of earlier dialogue revealed to us that Kira's sister has been suffering from similar symptoms. She was still doing it, now to her other child. It's scenes like this that I truly find effective in horror. A spooky ghost is spooky enough, but when it's tied to real life horror like this, things with terrifying implication, that's when a scary movie turns into something that really sticks with me. And that's what helps the movie on consequent watches too. You'd think that now that we know the ghosts don't want to harm Cole, that a lot of the horror would be deflated, but it really isn't. Not only because the ghosts still tend to lash out violently, as evidenced by Cole's bruises, but because of the emotional toll this takes on him and his family. On a second watch, we understand that these ghosts don't want to hurt him, but we also understand that he doesn't know this. And honestly, especially as a child, seeing this shit would scare me whether they wanted to hurt me or not. I just have to add this in, and this feels like a good place as any. I was searching the funeral scene to help me write this segment on it, and I stumbled upon a thing called Villains Wiki, and there Kira's mother is listed as the villain in The Sixth Sense.
Evildoer, alias Mrs. Collins, Kira's mother. Power skills, toxicology, hobby, poisoning her daughter to receive attention for herself.
Not everybody needs a hobby.
Goals, keep Kira and her sister sick. Remain undiscovered in her role or her daughter's death. All failed.
I mean, I guess it's accurate, but reading her stats like this as if she's fucking Thanos or something is really funny to me.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Stop it! You're ignorant.
I'm a big fan of how the dead are depicted in this film. Not only visually, but the place they hold in the story. Visually, I like that they're just people. The only thing that's revealing that they're dead is their injuries. There are no special effects. They're not translucent, they don't have zombie makeup, they're just there. Like with everything else, the presentation is just so good. And to have a quick tangent, something that I mentioned in the Shyamalan Collection video, and something that anyone who has watched the movie knows. Relating to the visual aspects and the dead, the color red is used effectively to show anything that's related to the dead or the spirit world. The church's red door, Cole's red sweater, Lynn's red hair, the red doorknob on the door that Malcolm can't open, and of course, Kira's mother is wearing red at her funeral. This is something that Shyamalan was very particular about, and anything red on the set that didn't have a purpose being red had to be removed.
Anytime there was red by mistake, I was like, get it out, get it out.
But back to the dead. Maybe it's because I've been watching a bunch of Ask a Mortician videos, which are great, but now that I watch movies like this, I kind of start thinking what the movie's relationship with death and the dead is. Of course, this is a supernatural horror film, so it's not the most realistic look in the strict sense of the word, but I feel like on a more emotional level, it makes sense to me. Death is something that is immediately a scary thing. It's something that is hard to cope with, even for the dead themselves. Especially in the context of the dead that Cole sees, the ones that are seeking help from him, that have all died in a rather traumatic or horrifying way. When Malcolm himself is dying, as revealed in the big twist scene, his last words are,
I think I'm okay, really. I think it just went in and out. It doesn't even hurt anymore.
He doesn't think he is dying, so even in the afterlife, coming to grips with his own death is a big thing he has to get over with. And I really like how the dead people are handled overall. I like how at the end of the movie, we get the scene of Cole casually hanging out with a burned dead person, who earlier in the movie would have been a scary sight, but now, despite the disfigurement, is just a someone, a dead someone that most people don't see, but someone. I like a good vengeful ghost story as much as anyone, and honestly a lot of those end in a way that makes you sympathetic to the ghost or ghosts anyways. But the fact that these ghosts are scary to begin with, mostly from miscommunication, and just the fact that seeing something that most people don't, something that's already dead and in another realm than ours, is in on itself scary. I don't know, I just think it's cool.
Then everything is wrapped up in a neat little package! Really, I mean that. Sorry if it sounded sarcastic.
The Sixth Sense is a classic, all around a really well-made film. It's a film that really showcases Shyamalan's expertise at the craft. Despite whatever missteps he might take in the future, something as good and precise as The Sixth Sense doesn't happen on accident. I think it's a masterpiece and really shows that Shyamalan is just good at what he does. But let's just say that Sixth Sense is only Exhibit A. I am now, apparently, committed to making this into a trilogy. This was a large undertaking, my largest one so far, aside from some of the short films I've made, but it was also a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to making more. So, like and subscribe and all that, hit the bell, whatever that does, and join me next time for Unbreakable, whenever that comes out. Hopefully soonish, but for now, thank you for watching, and bye bye.
You ever feel the prickly things on the back of your neck?
Yes.
And the tiny hairs on your arm, you know, when they stand up?
Yes.
That's them.